very good morning and thank you for coming on a chilly Sunday morning and coming close to the end of this wonderful conference. Uh, it's a rule that whenever you want to do something, ideally you always end up in some or the other trouble or the VIP syndrome, so as to say. And I have a series of such cases where something was planned and plan from plan A we had to change to plan B. So this was a 30-year-old male. Came with complaints of glare, particularly at night driving, but also during daytime, and he was already diagnosed elsewhere to have a bilateral posterior polar cataract. So we decided to go ahead with the right eye. This patient has never experienced presbyopia. And we discussed the possibilities of difficulties during the surgery or a drop nucleus or suboptimum IOL fixation. But we also put in a word to him which he agreed to, that if everything goes as per plan, we will consider a multifocal toric because he also had an astigmatism in this eye. We prefer, if possible, if the patient can afford it, a femtosecond cataract surgery for posterior polar cataracts, what we described as femtodelineation, where we make these rings of epinuclei basically, so that until the last part, until the lens removal part is done, the posterior polar part is protected and there is no need for any form of hydrodissection or hydrodelineation as well. So each ring gets aspirated from the support of the other, so that until the very last point there is an epinuclear cushion which actually protects the posterior polar part. So we went about slowly. Being a young patient, the IOP or the bottle height was kept low, about 45 centimeters of bottle height equivalent in a gravity based system, and an appropriate vacuum. And generally in a posterior polar cataract you want to let things happen under your control. So even if you are normally using a high flow rate, use a lower flow rate. What I am doing here is actually just detaching the epinuclear plate from the fornix. So notice I am not trying to remove it completely. And the reason why we want to do that, because now by detaching it, we have created a communication between the anterior and the posterior compartment. And now slow amount of fluid will start trickling in towards the posterior capsule. So now at this point of time, even if you come out and do a aggressive hydrodissection, there will be no rapid buildup of intralenticular pressure, and therefore very minimal chances of that capsule giving way. So we are detaching the epinuclear plate from the fornices and letting it be there as it is. And once that is done, we need to follow the principles of closed chamber technique very strictly. That is, before withdrawing the phaco probe, inject a dispersive viscoelastic so that the lens zonular diaphragm complex doesn't prolapse forward in a while. This epinuclear plate is a little challenging to remove because it's quite a thick epinuclear plate. This person, being young, was not so much of a challenge, but in a slightly elderly person this could be challenging. Fortunately, things have gone off very well. We've been able to remove the posterior polar cataract. The posterior capsule is also intact, and there was a plaque which you should never touch in a posterior polar cataract. But you can get overconfident at times and you can get ahead of your times, and we thought I thought I'll be able to polish this capsule. Being a young person, I wanted a clear visual access, and notice this nice beautiful iatrogenic slit that we dreaded at the beginning of surgery. We managed to prevent it, and we fortunately or unfortunately self-created it. Now at this point of time, again, don't panic, never let the chamber shallow. So again, inject dispersive viscoelastic, and now we have to convert this into a strong capsular excess margin. So unless we do that, if you go ahead and if you think there is no vitreous disturbance, let me go ahead with IOL implantation. Because this posterior capsule rent has weak edges, it is immediately going to split and lead to an unstable IOL fixation. So this is a cohesive viscoelastic that is being injected, and now the aim is to try and convert this posterior capsular tear into a strong PCCC or a strong posterior capsular excess margin, so that if the margins sorry, if the margins of this posterior capsular tear are strong, it will act just like an anterior capsular excess, and you can actually use this as a support to even go ahead and place the intraocular lens in the back. So very slow and gentle movements. You may have to grasp and regrasp multiple times because you want to make sure you're catching the capsule and not any strands of vitreous along with it. And notice you may have to use multiple incisions to make to do that. Always prefer micro incision forceps, and always try to use as many of the smaller ports instead of using the main port. So now we have been able to convert this into a strong posterior capsular excess margin. And now we can still go ahead and place confidently a multifocal toric IOL inside the capsular bag. So because we had a strong margin, we decided to go ahead with our plan A. This is the Acrisoft multifocal toric going inside the eye. The advantage being it opens up very slowly. So you have a lot of time to maneuver it gently into the capsular bag without the fear of sudden opening or snapping up of the IOL. And then of course along the toric IOL axis, you place the IOL along the appropriate axis. Viscoelastic, obviously you don't want to be stupid to go behind the IOL to remove viscoelastic in this case, and these patients will have some viscoelastic which would go back into the anterior hyaloid phase, and therefore we always tend to prefer to give mannitol to these patients post-operatively, and this is what the patient ended up on table, and this is the patient 1 month follow-up. So if you follow the principles of converting the PCR into a posterior capsular excess margin, you can go ahead with IOL implantation in the bag. And always make sure that your retinal colleague keeps evaluating these patients post-operatively for possible retinal breaks or cystoid macular edema that may be occurring. This is the patient at 4 months, very stable in the bag IOL. Another similar case of a small pupil, dense-ish cataract, and in small pupils, if you feel you're going to have difficulty, there's no shame in using any form of dilating devices. We prefer the iris hooks because they are fairly user friendly, and they can be used at any stage of surgery. So having used the iris retractors, things seem to be going on pretty well. Fairly, not a very dense cataract, about grade 2 to 3 nuclear density of cataract. And because now the pupil is dilated, we have an appropriate size rhexis, and things seem to be going on fairly smoothly. After the chopping is done, make sure all the fragments are divided before you start removing these fragments, and make sure that your probe remains more in the center of the eye. Your left hand does most of the movement, the right hand should not move. This applies in all cases irrespective of iris retractors or not, so that the fluidics work best and there are lesser chances of iris prolapse and floppy iris occurring. So once again, the fragment removal seems to have gone off quite well. And while completing the irrigation aspiration, notice a fragment sort of came out. Quite often in these small pupils, sometimes some of these fragments tend to go and hide behind the iris, and they come out at the end. And at this point of time, the best thing would have been to use a phacoemulsification handpiece and remove this large fragment that has come out. But sometimes, like we said, you feel quite often you do remove these small chips with irrigation aspiration. So why unnecessarily go with a probe, and you just increase the vacuum. So I increase the vacuum to 550 or so. Increase the IOP to about 50 IOP, and I thought I'm winning. Slowly but surely I'm winning. But notice this, if you notice, there was a sudden surge while removing this dense fragment. Keep noticing here, and the capsule immediately came up, and that created this nice little punch where the surgery should not have had a punch at this point of time. So at this point of time, once again, do not panic. Make sure that you form the chamber before removing these instruments. Once again, follow the same principles: dispersive viscoelastic first, and then a cohesive viscoelastic, and then use micro incision forceps to convert this puncture that you have created into a posterior capsular excess margin. And if you can do that, like in the previous case that we showed, you should be able to provide a good support for in the bag IOL implantation. So we are going ahead. There is no harm in doing a slightly larger posterior capsular excess. Don't worry about the size of the capsular excess. It's very difficult to make a very, very large posterior capsular excess because the posterior capsular excess behaves very differently. So if you notice, while trying to remove the flap, what I did notice that the vitreous was stuck to it. If you notice, it wasn't coming off easily. So at this point of time, you don't want to pull it, because what will happen is you'll drag along vitreous along with it. and therefore you need, whenever there is the presence of vitreous, you need to address it. We prefer the pars plana approach. We remove the vitreous from around the posterior capsulorhexis tear, and then we go ahead with in the bag IOL implantation, always reconfirm by injecting triamcinolone that there is no further vitreous disturbance. And we could place the toric IOL in the bag at an appropriate axis, and this is the patient with this posterior capsulorhexis on the second post-operative day. And the final case, like I said, I could go on for an entire 1.5 hours of the various complications that we have created in a toric IOL. So this was a posterior polar cataract with a pre-existing posterior capsule defect. So if you can notice here, this defect, there's already some lens matter that is already into the anterior hyaloid phase. And therefore we were more prepared this time that we may have to do plan A, plan B, plan C. We follow the same principles of lens removal, that is cylindrical lens division pattern, trying to remove one epinuclear plate from the support of the other. And slowly and surely we definitely feel we are winning. And fortunately, even until the end of surgery, we were able to prevent this from extending further. So this is the actual posterior capsular defect that is existing along with the plaque. So here you can see the hole that is pre-existing in this area. So once again we have an opportunity to convert this into a strong capsulorhexis margin and also circumvent this plaque that is already there. If you try and go through the plaque, it is likely to extend and it is likely to tear. Therefore we go ahead and circumvent the plaque, and that may mean making a slightly larger posterior capsulorhexis, but that's absolutely fine. You can make at least a 3.5 to 4 millimeter posterior capsulorhexis. Keep changing your hands from one incision to the other as may be required, and be very, very slow, be very, very gentle in making sure that you are catching nothing except the posterior capsulorhexis. And with patience, we were able to convert this once again into a posterior capsulorhexis margin. Fortunately, there wasn't any vitreous disturbance that occurred, but the best way to do that is to inject triamcinolone and make sure that there is no disturbance that has taken place. And we could go ahead with this patient had fairly significant astigmatism. So if you notice, the patient required a T7. So we did decide to go ahead with in the bag implantation of this toric IOL at an appropriate axis. And fortunately there was no further vitreous disturbance as well at the end of surgery. Make sure the chamber doesn't collapse even at the end of surgery, and this is how the patient is at 2 weeks follow-up. So I think there will be times when events may occur even in the best of situations, even with femtocataract, with everything. But if we are prepared to handle them and tackle them coolly, we can still achieve as good an outcome as we plan to set out with. So I would like to end my talk here, and I would appreciate suggestions or feedback from the audience or from the panel.